a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born there.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born there.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
You're born there, you're born there.
Tell them that we born there.
You're born there, you're born there. I am a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born there.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born there.
I am proud to be a...
Greetings and welcome again to another episode of Navel String Connections. I'm Bilal Morris, sitting in for today's show. We are going to have a very important showing today. In this episode, our sister ARIA LIGHTFOOT is not with us today. She is behind the Belize Diaspora Summit live in Florida going on starting today. And our show will be rebroadcasting the introduction to the launching and the introduction to the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0, the second annual Belize Diaspora Summit. The first Belize Diaspora Summit was held in Los Angeles last year, June, and this year Belize Diaspora Summit is now held in Florida, in the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And this morning we had our brother Most High, who XTV, who broadcasted the opening of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0 live from out of Fort Lauderdale this morning. And we will, for those of you who were not able to watch the broadcast of the second annual Belize Diaspora Summit live out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, you will get a chance to watch it on Navel String Connections this evening. And as soon as we have it all queued up, we'll watch maybe the first hour of the summit, and so that you, the viewers across the Belizean diaspora, those of you who could not attend, being that you live in some other part of the United States, may you be in Chicago, New York, and you were not able to fly to the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida to be a part of this historic event, you will get a chance to see it. And you can also view the Belize Diaspora Summit, this live broadcast, Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0, live from out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, live on XTV with Most High. You can go to the Facebook XTV page, where you also can see the show, but you could also visit the XTV Facebook page as well as YouTube to see that rebroadcast. But for all viewers, those Belizeans who watch the Navel String Connections on a weekly basis, we want to now invite you to tune in, to tell a friend to get a chance to see the opening of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. And with no further ado, we want to go straight to that as soon as our brother technician Harlan behind the controls, as soon as our brother Harlan is ready and have it queued up and ready to go, we'll go straight to that. And I just want to say again, this is Navel String Connections. I'm Bilal Morris, your host for today's episode. And this is a XTV production. Our producer is Nur Muhammad. The man behind the controls today is Harlan. And without any further ado, let's go to the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. Harlan?
Recognize and welcome Dr. Andrew Trumbach. He's the co-CEO and CFO and co-founder of Oasis Capital. Our panelists are very distinguished persons, and we want to get a lot of insight into this question of how do we move to creating a diaspora policy. After the discussion, we'll open it up for some questions. I want to start the discussion with Dorian and ask you if you could just frame this in broad aspirational goals. Like, what is the hope here?
So, the Belizean diaspora represents probably the only global community that resides outside Belize and looks at Belize in a way that is more than just an economic opportunity, a beneficial opportunity, right? Belize is a part of our heartstring. We call it the motherland, right? And just as we grow in our families and leave, we disperse, and we extend where our families reside. It's the same thing with the Belizean diaspora, right? We grow and we disperse. So we're just as Belizean as the Belizeans, right? In fact, I think you as the keynote speaker and the ambassador set a poignant theme and tone for the conversation that we're to have, right? We represent, for Belize, an opportunity to access the global economy, the global community, to grow beyond our borders in ways, right? Is Belize the land? Yes. Is Belize the people? Yes, right? Belize is the people regardless of where the people reside, right? And I think formalizing that relationship is important, right? And it's a lot of what the theme of this summit is about, right? How do we formalize the relationship that recognizes not just the opportunities that the diaspora represents, but the stake that the diaspora has in Belize itself, right? So I think that's important to recognize, and a formal relationship embedded in policy helps to do that.
Andrew, can you build on this idea of just the importance of what's there in the diaspora as a potential for the country and the opportunity to more formalize that relationship?
Let me take a step back. Look around the room here. We've got over 200,000 diaspora. We've pretty much says it all. We need to be able to create policies that will include this entire diaspora population. I consider the Belizean diaspora as an imaginary community. This imaginary community transmits over $150 million US to Belize annually. We're looking at about 3 to 5% of the GNP. This imaginary community has supported, sponsored, and developed thousands of students from Belize within the foreign communities. We have networked effectively. We have done research together. I have done research with some of my colleagues. Imagine we can enhance and focus this diaspora collaboration, create platforms that can provide opportunities in investment, foreign direct investments, provide opportunities in doing remittances easier. Okay, it is a problem with sending money to the country. Provide scholarships and more networking within the diaspora population. We can do this if we effectively have policies and it's supported by the state. Thank you.
Dylan, I want to bring you in this conversation just as an introductory point. We're talking about the potential, the benefit, this large amount of human capital, financial resources, but we haven't been able to get at it. What do you see as just broadly some of the obstacles and challenges for us to kind of move in the direction that we're talking about?
Yes, thanks, Darrell, and your introduction, I think, answered some of those questions, or at least began to explore them. I think maybe a way to put the question you ask is, why haven't we so far been successful since independence in having a comprehensive diaspora policy? And I will name 5 or 6 things right off as introductions. One is we have not had the vision as a country, both resident and non-resident, that we all agree to. This is where we want to go with diaspora policy. That lack of political vision and national vision. Secondly, we have been unable to rectify what rights the diaspora should have in our constitution. And the constitution is the biggest policy for any country. That's where everything flows from. And the only aspect in our constitution has dealt with really is dual nationality, which is 1985, we must say, was a good success, because there is dual nationality in the Constitution, but the rights do not extend from there. And we have to ask why. So without fixing that, it's going to be hard to fix the rest. Secondly, a lot of us don't realize that Belize as a state does not have a migration and development policy at all. Not even for immigrants coming in, much less people leaving. So there's no policy. And diaspora policy is part of migration policy. So it's hard to have a diaspora policy if you don't have a comprehensive migration policy. The third thing, well, the fourth thing, I suppose, is that without policy, you can't have a plan. And a policy without a plan is like a ship without sails. And that has happened off and on, where we have sporadic actions of return investment incentives, but they go and come with the political flow of partisan politics. They do not have life, for the most part, over a long period of time. Who gives more emphasis to it here and there? And the last two things I'll say quickly. One is that one of the reasons it has failed is the lack of bipartisan or multi-partisan approaches in Belize to the issue. And that I won't go into except to leave it there, because that is actually something we all know. But the final point I'll make here is we also, I think, both non-residents and resident Belizeans have failed to understand that it is not only, although it is very, very important, it is not only how the diaspora contributes to Belize. It is how Belizeans also contribute to the diaspora, and how Belizeans and diaspora have mutual benefits and contributions to make. It is not only what the diaspora contributes. And if we take those issues and understand why we don't have one, then we begin to see how we then get to the point of developing comprehensive, evidence-based, inclusive policy on diaspora.
One of the things that you mentioned, which is very important, is this idea of an evidence-based approach. We talk about the diaspora. We're here, we're seeing the face of the diaspora in this room, but the diaspora are very different. And there are different numbers that we look at, and there are different, just how the makeup, how the face of the diaspora is. How do we, and perhaps Dorian, you can chime in here, how do we get to that understanding first as to what the evidence is before we can even start about the analysis and the policy? Like, what are we talking about in terms of the face of the diaspora?
One of the things that is critical even before that stage is this nuanced discussion of what is the diaspora, who is the diaspora, right? Is it the first generation of people that left Belize? Is it their descendants? Who does it include? And by virtue of that, who does it exclude, right? And then once we have some notion of what that means, we can then start to go through the process of identifying where the diaspora exists, not just in the US, but throughout the world, right? And the data collection process, I think, is important, but this idea of identifying who is the diaspora is also important, right? And it circles back to one of the reasons for formalizing and legitimizing the relationship between the country and its diaspora, right? Without a formal relationship, you lose that connection after the first generation. If we think about those who've left the country, they were born in Belize and then left, and then their descendants, their offsprings that they've had in the States or in Jamaica or in Canada or wherever they are, right? What connection do their offsprings have back to Belize, right? So how long does this diasporan connection persist? right? How sustainable is it? And I think with policy, we can embed some more sustained relationships, not just with the initial descendants of the diaspora, but with continuity, right? So that it can continue to grow. We can continue to chronicle who is this diaspora, what talents they have, where the talents exist, what opportunities there are for the country to leverage its diaspora, and what opportunities there are for the diaspora to leverage Belize as well, right? But establishing these connections, understanding where the connections persist, I think is going to be critical, right? And it goes back again to formalizing the relationship in ways that probably lead to policy.
I agree 100% with you. The first step is to map, identify the locations, look at the demographics, both economic demographics as well as age and certain. Without those mappings, there is no way we can target and have policies that target these individuals. It's critical for us to be able to build policies that will target the needs of these individuals. If we don't do that, it would not be a very inclusive diaspora community. So it's critical we start off creating the vision. It's critical we map who the diaspora are. We understand their economic position. We understand how we can target those specific groups. And to say your point, Jamaica did a great, in my opinion, program where they went to the youth and they started developing the youth because that's sustainability. That allows the second generation to identify with Belize. I have 2 kids, and quite frankly, I don't think I did a great job of having them identify with Belize, and that's something we all need to be aware of and bring that second generation into that community.
This is a good point that you were mentioning, and I want to talk about it broadly because Dylan was mentioning something, and the question that came to my mind is accountability and stakeholdership. So you mentioned the idea of political parties and vision and political will. And Andrew, you also mentioned the idea of the role of families to inculcate in their children a respect for a Belizean national identity. Who takes charge of this in terms of just like accountability and ownership?
Very good question. I think that it has to be a multi-stakeholder approach. At the base would be representatives of the 2 major populations, diaspora, Belizeans, and Belizeans at home. That would have to be, I mean, if these 2 will have to be part of creating the policy. The Belizeans at home have a structure called government through which representatives are elected, and we expect them to lead. But if they don't lead on it, there can be the the bottom-up approach where we have demand being what forces or pushes government to act. I think that without that multi-sectoral approach, we won't go anywhere. It can't be a policy coming only from the diaspora to Belize and saying, here's the policy. Absolutely. Because Belizeans at home, if they're not a part of creating it, will say, what's going on here? It has to come from both populations, and government clearly, as the major stakeholder, will have to be the organizer of the process if necessary, if they're interested in it. And I think they are. I mean, I don't know how many people know that the current medium-term development strategy for Belize includes the call for a diaspora policy. I think it should have been done by 2023, but I understand there's a draft of something being discussed. But my caution here is we don't want a policy that is just, here's the policy. It has to include discussions, dialogue, people talking and saying, and the needs analysis that we're talking about. What are the needs that Belize has that we can meet? What are the needs of the diaspora that needs to be met? And so that listing of a matrix, needs, contributions of diaspora, needs, contribution of Belize, those have to be clear, because you cannot just form a policy by saying, just out of the air, this is my opinion, and here we go. So if the ministry is indeed creating a policy, I really urge that it not be top-down.
This is actually an important point that it be something that's organic and that can get buy-in. One of the things that you mentioned, Dorian, that I didn't even recognize when we talk about a diaspora, and forgive me for my ignorance, but it's oftentimes very much North American centric. And how do we have very deliberate efforts to be inclusive in the conversation and to bring in people who are from Central America and bringing in people who are from Africa, Europe, or the Caribbean? Like, how do we ensure that that ownership and stakeholder approach, that top-down approach, has buy-in from the wider diaspora community?
So the word that comes to my mind is grassroots, right? We talked about sort of bringing things from the bottom up. When I think about sort of on a personal level, the connection that my children who were born in the US have to my family, still resident in Belize, my siblings, my parents and such, a bilateral effort is necessary to sustain that relationship and to give agency to it, right? To have my kids actually really feel like they're a part of that family in Belize, right? And not just by name, but by emotion, by the spirit, by culture, right? And so I think when I look at what's special about Belize, right? We talked about things like, saying like protocol having been established, and these things that when you hear it, you feel it, right? These are grassroots things. These are organic things that sort of manifest. And so I wonder at times if there's a way in the primary school system, and as we're bringing up our kids, we can embed in them just a pride for being Belizean so that they want to walk around and tell everyone they're Belizean and have their kids connect back to Belize regardless of where they are, right? In ways that are organic. Policy is important, but policy won't have change without the buy-in of the people on the ground, right? And so having these organic relationships, these organic manifestations of culture, pride, emotional connections, I think will be where the answer lies, right? Policy will help to shape that, but it'll come from us on the ground.
That's an excellent point, that it has to be people-led and it has to be grassroots. Andrew, I know that you are a leader in business and you have tremendous experience going back and forth within the United States and Belize. How can we ensure that it's those kinds of relationships that really take the lead, that it's not really a political conversation, it's the relationship, particularly economic, because we want to bring resources to the country, and that's an easy opportunity. Economic relations, everybody wants the GDP and so forth to go. How can we ensure that people like you, who are the face of the diaspora and who are the face of this interchange, that kind of relationship is the focus and the priority in terms of building a coherent diaspora policy?
Let me just say that reading the last IDB reports, about 60 to 70% of the diaspora population is in the US. We have 10 to 15 in Canada. So a sampling of the US population, making those policies, I believe would be a really good comprehensive of all the needs of the diaspora population. Okay, it's the bulk of it. Now, there's a lot of areas that I believe the state can improve to focus the diaspora population back to Belize. Especially in the area of foreign direct investments. They have done a very good job of creating Finance Belize, which is building the economic sector and the financial center in Belize. It's still not sufficient. The diasporas, I believe, should probably be working hand in hand with the Foreign Affairs Office, using their consulate and their embassies to promote some of these communication, which is kind of lacking within the diaspora. I also believe that there should be platforms made for us to be able to remit funds to Belize, be able to excite the diaspora population, train them, educate them in terms of understanding from a cultural perspective that you can invest in groups, you can do partnerships, you can do joint ventures. There's a capital market. If we can train our Belizean diaspora that it is okay, it is safe, there's a certain trust built in, then I believe that that will enhance those remittances going to Belize.
Dorian, I want you to talk about this because you mentioned an important point, which Andrew mentioned, which is we tend to think of the diaspora in economic terms, and we tend to emphasize we have a Belizean identity, but members of the diaspora also have an American identity, and that American identity can bring a lot of knowledge and impact, just as how Andrew was talking about, to the country. That experience of like a strong tradition in democracy, accountability, good governance, economic development, that is integral to this conversation as well. How can we make sure that that's important?
Right. So you mentioned identity. I'll reframe it as access, right? Because we're a part of a global environment, it gives Belize reach to access to things in the United States, financial and otherwise, right? Access to education, access to sometimes medical benefits, right? And access to progress, even, right? Different ways of thinking, right? One of my peeves, I'll admit, is being on Belize time, right? I hope that we progress beyond Belize time and learn time, just time, right?
We didn't really begin late today, because in Belize it is now 10, quarter to 10.
We're on Belize time.
Right, Belize time, right? But it gives us an opportunity to progress and learn, right? And acknowledge that some of the benefits that we can have go beyond financial. Another peeve that I have is often being a little bit short-sighted and only counting the financial contributions that come to Belize, right? There are opportunities that go beyond that. If I think about my personal situation, most of my financial remittances would go to a very localized network in my family and maybe close friends and such in Belize. But my contributions beyond finances go well beyond that, right? I have expertise in higher education, in science and technology and innovation, and I've consulted and contributed to the country in that context in ways that probably outvalue the financial remittances that I've made, right? So this access that the diaspora gives to Belize, right, can benefit in ways beyond the remittances, the financial remittances that we can count in tangible ways that will pay it forward over and over and over again, right? The difference between giving a man a fish and teaching him how to fish.
Dylan, in terms of moving this forward, and one of the things I wanted you to speak about specifically is how important are institutions like the University of Belize in this conversation for formalizing the diaspora relations? I mean, oftentimes in Belize, we tend to make things a little bit more political, but institutions like UB can make it, as you said, evidence-based, more structural, it has more credibility and legitimacy and so forth. It's owned by a community institution. How important is that?
Yes, before I answer that question, and just to pick up on something here, that yes, there is a need to do a research on what the contributions are, and I think that it goes so much beyond, as you say, remittances. And even remittances can be, how it is used, how Belize takes advantage of that can be also improved. But there's tourism. The amount Belizeans spend going to Belize. There is construction, Belizeans constructing homes, being part of that construction part. The list can go on and on and on. And as you say, it's not only economic. And I was thinking as you were talking about identity, that because Belizeans have the possibility for dual nationality, we always think, oh, Belizean Americans, but it could be Belizean European, it could be Belizean Cuban, it could be Belizean anything, or it could be multiple identities. And I think that Belize has something going there where we need to see ourselves beyond just one identity. But to answer your question, the institutions, yes, very important. And the one I direct, the Belize Policy Research Institute at UB, one of the advantages that we bring to the table is that as an independent, nonpartisan group, we can coordinate, say, stakeholders with some credibility that a political party itself might not have, one or the other, or others might not have. And so also we have the skills, the expertise at the UB and outside UB that we can harness. And it gives the policy at the end a better chance of take-up by a wider cross-section of people.
So we want to move the discussion into the how. Like, how do we get this done? We have very capable Belizeans, both in the homeland and in the diaspora. But walk us through, Dylan, and begin us off with that conversation in relation to, like, how do we move forward from talk to action? What are the steps that we need to get done?
Yes, I mean, I think that, I mean, I think we know the theory very well, but in the context of where we are now and knowing what we know, what has worked or not worked, there needs to be, and this is my own impression, brainstorming a bit, there needs to be an agreement between diaspora organizations and organizations back home that we're going to work on this together, and the government is included in that as one of the stakeholders. And that body together does the work that is needed to do policy development, beginning with situation analysis. What's the background? What's the data? All the evidence we've been speaking of, this is what we have to work with. You analyze that and you say, what are people interested in? What are the needs in both communities? And you come up with strategies then to get those goals met. And it has to, I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, but that's the way you do it. And you try to make sure there's coherence with this policy you're recommending with all of the policies out there, because if there's not coherence, if for example, if there's no migration policy, or if there is one, you still have to make sure that this diaspora policy is coherent with that. And then, of course, implementation is key. That requires human resources, money, and structure. A unit is not enough. It has to be perhaps even a sort of statutory body that is for diaspora relations with its own structure. Because if that is not there permanently, it will still keep going up and down over time.
That is critical. Let me add, having a structure in any, either it's nonprofit or for profit. Once you have the foundation, you have the structure, you have the committed employees and the budget to cover that at least for a year or two until the structure can go out and create its own funding and financing, you're off to a very, very slow start. You're almost looking at a point of failure because it's not sustainable. We have a fractured diaspora community throughout LA, Florida, New York. We need to have a national ID program where it starts from the top and then it pushes down to the localities. I believe that can, like I said prior, that can only be done with the government support and probably moving it to the Foreign Affairs Office where you have those costs covered with the embassies and the consulate offices.
May I just quickly add 30 seconds? I think one of the things we also have to visit is why has it not happened yet, right? You mentioned the intelligent people both at home and abroad, and so for me the answer lies in possibly one of two things or a combination thereof, right? Either something passive like not having a sufficient appreciation for the benefit that such a policy and formal relationship would have, or something active like a resistance because of a concern or fear for, again, what such a policy might mean and what it might threaten, right? Again, whether the concern is founded or otherwise.
For public awareness and education.
Right. And so there's, I think, a question of what is the resistance? Why is it not taking place, right? I think, and there's an inertia there that we have to overcome, and that will then allow us to say, okay, once we've overcome that inertia, how can we then put the practical and effective policies in place?
So a lot of questions are going through my head, and we're going to open it up for audience questions to just get some feedback shortly. But several things that came in my mind. Andrew, you mentioned this idea of just a fractionalized community. How do we unify that? And like, I want you to think about that in terms of, because if we're talking about a diaspora policy, we need some degree of structure or formalization within who we're dealing with. And then, Dylan, an important thing you mentioned, which I think we can't lose sight of it, because in my work in some policies, we tend to have policy silos, and we tend to say, you know what, I want a policy for this, or I want a policy for this. How do we integrate the diaspora policy in an overall development strategy for the country? So those two questions, either of you can go first if you want.
I believe we need a communication policy that can create mechanisms to be able to reach out to all the diasporas and do it on a frequent basis. Newsletters, media, the national ID will bring them and identify who they are, and now you target those and you try to create the needs, you see what the needs are, and you reach out to them, you bring them, you get them to collaborate with everyone. And, you know, as an example, I have a graduate degree, I have 2 graduate degrees. Here's my colleague, I've never met him. That's crazy. And you remember the diaspora community. We cannot allow this to happen, guys. We have to communicate and have a national database, maybe do an ID with some type of incentive that I would want to go register and be able to say, oh, I've got a national ID. When I go to Belize, it means something. I think that's a good first step.
Yeah. One of the things that I'll come back to this, because things are coming up on the side, but it goes to Dorian's point that there has to be organic things in the communities. I mean, like when I was younger, Belize Day here, at this here. So like, it can't just be like a formal thing. We have to actually have relational opportunities where we're building social capital among one another. But we'll come back to that. Dylan, in terms of the...
Yeah, in the conversation made me think of, I think, what is one of the biggest obstacles to a diaspora policy so far. And it's the same thing that is an obstacle to migration policy, to language policy in Belize, and even sometimes to political reform. And this is that we are a multi-ethnic society, both in the diaspora and in Belize. Politicians, in fact, both major political parties, get almost equal support from all ethnic groups. My observation as a political scientist is that both political parties, major political parties, fear doing anything that deals with ethnicity and race relations and interaction, because they don't want to be seen to be choosing one or the other. This is one of the barriers that, when you list your barriers to policy when you're doing your strategic planning, that you will have to address. How do we get over this sensitivity that doing a policy like this could cause some Belizeans to say, oh, why are they being favored, and why are we not being favored? And so that's something that is a barrier, but it can be overcome. It's something to know and acknowledge that it is there. And the broader issue and elephant in the room is voting rights, as you mentioned. And that's also one of the issues that politicians are going to step back from for that reason, and also because there is the cost element. And as all reform in Belize, I mean, political reform, as you know, is my area of expertise, if there's any. But governments like the status quo, parties like the status quo, and diaspora voting for them is like a big open, will I lose my seat? How it affects me as the politician, as opposed to the nation of Belize, both at home and abroad.
One of the things that I want to, and getting back to this broad conversation, how do we center this question on the issue of national development? Like, how do we bring it home to people here and people living in Belize, that this is not only talking about people who left Belize 10, 15, 20 years ago, but we're actually really talking about our relationship together, and how do we center it on this question of national development?
No, I think that it's a matter of showing the evidence and educating people, increasing public awareness of how it makes sense to have a policy and actions that use all of Belize's resources at home and abroad to get to the same goal. And I was talking to someone before, and my sense is that the sensitivities in Belize, in terms of resident Belizeans, has decreased in terms of worries about diaspora voting and diaspora relations. I think that younger people especially, I think, are more interested in a sort of multi approach, dual nationality, multinationality approach to their own lives and development. And how many passports can I have? Because yeah, this is globalized. This is a globalized world. As long as we don't buy them.
Yeah, so I'm going to connect two things, one that Dylan said about sort of the needs and contributions matrix, and something that Andrew said about the awareness of who's out there and where they are and what opportunities they have, both for me to leverage, but also where I can contribute, right? In terms of nationally developing the country, Belize is a developing country, and strategically, there are areas that should be, and in fact, in many cases, are prioritized, right? Whether it be medicine, economic development, tourism, agriculture, right? Green energy is a thing that we're thinking more and more about. I guarantee you that there are experts, not just dabblers, but experts in all those areas throughout the diaspora. Right? Not just in the US, but throughout the world. I guarantee that, right? Why? Because I have this experience all the time, sitting next to someone and then learning that they're an expert in a space that I couldn't even imagine, astrophysics, right? And all these other areas, right? And so if we are able to develop this database of awareness, right, where we can identify the doctors, the engineers, the economists, right, the political scientists, the planners, right, and connect them back to the national development of Belize, right? I think that's going to be critical and important, and it's a missed opportunity that we should start to tap into more and more.
And just to add, if we had one lens for the diaspora community, a focused policy, the amount of influence, leverage that could be taken to our birth country would be tremendous. Eventually, the government would need to address that and accept the fact that they need to collaborate with us or support us.
We're going to open it up for questions from the audience. If anybody wants to raise a question, if you could just indicate your name and which panelists you want to answer that question. Anyone has any questions, you could just indicate what your questions are, and we'll get to the questions. We have allowed about 15 minutes for questions from the panelists, from the audience.
Can I jump in? I am Albert Williams, professor at Nova Southeastern University. You need mic? I don't know, I got a big mouth.
Oh, for the streaming, okay.
This is a great panel. I am very pleased to see that you're covering all the core. A policy, by the way, I'll make a comment, then I'll ask you the question. In my younger days at the Ministry of Agriculture, I actually worked on creating an agriculture policy for the country. And we went through and talked about all the stakeholders and tried to get the impact and input from others. And we started with the vision, the mission, all the strategies, and we went down to the action items. Built this beautiful book, sent it to the cabinet, and they looked it over and they said, hey, it's written by smart people. And so the point of that story is that you need a policy that's workable, that can be utilized, and policy implies resources. So what do you see what's going to happen in the visionary part of all of that? Because right now we're dreaming stuff up, but I like when you get down to earth. What can we do with it? We don't want the horse to die when we're trying to grow the grass. I'll leave it at that.
We have to include the policymakers from day one. And yes, have it be in language. We know enough about not having it be too academic, so that it is accessible to as many people using technologies that are now available. We could have TikTok, public awareness things, breaking it down in one page, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that the lessons are well known in Belize now, I think, as how to make a policy successful. There are people who are on top of that one. Yeah.
I believe also we need to revert back to them preparing a budget and the needs of building the foundation of this diaspora, so it's sustainable for at least a year. I believe that should be a priority. It will enable the diaspora population to get started and to be able to get some of those programming mechanisms in place.
And I would just add, in addition to that, I think it's critical to engage the people on the ground, the laymen and the laywomen on the streets, right? Because we want this buy-in. A top-down thing will never work if we don't have the buy-in of all that's involved, right? And so I think it's critical not just to integrate the policymakers, but also the people who will be directly and indirectly impacted by the policies that are being made.
We have another question. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, yes.
I could borrow yours.
So I'm Darnell Buller, currently the president of the Belize Association of South Florida and the president of Buller Realty as well. All right, so it's great that we're having these discussions, but I think the key thing is when you have a database, the question would be is who's running the database, if it's ran by the government, and I think those are all questions that really and truly, to unite or to have so many different Belizeans, we all have different ideas. We all want someone to run left, someone to run the middle, to the right. So if we create a national database, the question is, why is everyone not going to buy into it? And once you have people's information, contact, email, and so forth, where's the protection in making sure that that database is not being utilized in a non-productive manner where someone gets a hold of that and then a different script is being written with those people? So I think the key is ensuring that if there is a database that's created, that there's safety in having a uniform people that we can all move forward with a positive and not use that database for something negative. I think that would be probably some fear and why some people won't want to do it.
Right. So when we talk about databases, it sounds like this very technologically advanced thing, right? I'll give an example of probably a crowdsourced, right? Meaning it came from the people. It's not owned by any one entity. Wikipedia. Right, Wikipedia is it's crowdsourced. So the information that is fed into Wikipedia comes from the universe of people, right? No one person owns any one Wikipedia page, and in fact, it's against policy for any individual to create their own Wikipedia page, right? It should come organically, even though we know sometimes that may not be true, right? And many of us do have public personas, right? That with things like ChatGPT and all the other technologies that are out there that are scraping the web and all your information that you put out there either knowingly or unwittingly, it's almost already there. I guarantee you the first step that probably comes at a close approximation of the talent that we have in the diaspora can be gathered with just scraping ChatGPT and other things that are already out there.
We already have a database, and that's what we've been trying to create at the Diaspora Relations Unit. And that's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut into your, but just on this conversation, I apologize, I didn't mean to take, okay. So we have a database, and actually this is one of the points I wanted to make. We have tried, I mean, every which way you could think of to get people to sign up on this database. We have explained that this database is only for the unit. We use the information just to be able to communicate with the diaspora, reach out to the diaspora, provide them with maybe, local programs or even programs throughout the world that involves our diaspora, right? I mean, why are we going to reinvent the wheel, right? We already have it going. We have a good number of people in there already. Maybe close to 10? But this is the thing, right? We have tried and tried. We give away land. We tell people just sign up. You know, you'll be part of raffle. It's difficult. You know, initially you have a good response, everybody excited, and then it just dies down, and it's very difficult. No, you have to understand, so many people are undocumented, right? And there's a fear of giving their information, understandable. But this is the thing, if you know, you worry that government have your information, but if you want to vote, if you want one policy, if you know, they'll have the information, and there's some trust that has to be given there with that kind of information. Again, like I said, we have tried. I can tell you, like, for your passport, right? That information's not shared with everybody. But if you want a passport, you have to give them your information, right? And as far as I'm aware, that information is confidential, is not shared. And it's the same thing with the unit, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make that database, you know, we're trying to create that database where we get as many people in there. And I'm not as well versed as, for example, Dr. Vernon here with policy in terms of, you know, more the details concerned with policy. But I will say, to have a policy, you need the strength of the number of people that are backing that policy, the data. But you need data, but you need people behind that policy. If we can't get one database together, you know, how do you get people to back, and a large number of people to back that policy?
Sandy, this isn't a novel idea. This has been done by many diaspora communities. You have to build a trust, so you have to have public awareness. You need to communicate to your diaspora population. You need to be able to do events like you're doing the land freezing here with among the terminals. When they come in, they need to be able to, you address it there, you get somebody to take the information.
We do all of it.
And then you need to provide an incentive for them to do that.
We give away land, we do raffles, you name it, and we're willing to accept suggestions, ideas. We always ask for it. You know, we always ask for it. Tell us what it is you want. We're there to serve you, we're there to help you, but, you know, please provide us with information so we can reach out to you.
I think that you raised some good points. There is fear in every migrant population in every country in the world to share information. It's not unique here. In Belize, there was an asylum recently for migrants, and about, I think it was 15% of the estimated number signed up. They're afraid to give their information. Same thing. In fact, we have a diaspora in Belize too for other countries, big ones. But I think that one approach that I've seen works for things like this is that you, of course, will keep confidential your name and your address and other social security information or something like that. But there are also other information. What are your needs? What are your skills? What are your interests? This can be shared. A census does that annually. The last census in Belize doesn't share your information, your private information, but you get a breakdown of what people think about certain things, how many people are in each ethnic group. This is the kind of information that is needed if you're going to have a sound evidence-based policy. So perhaps an approach is to distinguish between information that is confidential and not, and make that clear at the beginning.
And that is on the form. All of that you just said is on the form. If you go to the website, if you look at the form on the website, it gives you exactly that. It tells you these 3 items are absolutely necessary. These are optional. You know, what part of the city are you from, you know, that you're like affiliated with, you know, what is your talent, your expertise? Do you want to share it with, you know, other Belizeans? All of that is there. I cannot stress enough, please for everybody to go onto the website, to Belize Diaspora. The information is there. Keep signing on. Keep checking in. We're trying. You were talking about an ID. What we would like to do is get an ID for the diaspora where when they come to Belize, they get certain discounts because they're part of the diaspora. You know, you go to the Keys, you're at a hotel, at a restaurant, you know, all those kinds of, you know.
This is the issue with identifying the needs of the diaspora. We know right now in this environment, people are afraid of being deported. The ICE has created a fear in this country. We have no support system for deportees going to Belize. Set up a national ID, do a test saying, here's a support system we put in place, you need to have a registration. I guarantee you, you do those specific target events, you're going to get people signing up. People that you would never get otherwise. But you've got to look at what your diaspora population is, you've got to look at what their needs are, and then you target those via marketing to those people.
We have a question and comment here.
Yeah, quick question, Kareem Mosher. Faculty at Ohio State University in urban planning. Comment and then a quick question. I think maybe the gentleman that spoke before, maybe he was not alluding to voluntary dissemination of information, but sort of involuntary, you know, somebody hacked the system or whatever. But that aside, bringing together the idea of research and identifying a diaspora, I think that is good in terms of making it clear to Belizeans living in Belize that it's not some, you know, amorphous, evil group, you know, that exists somewhere. But also the question is, does the diaspora have to have a policy before it can organize and do work on the ground? Why can't there be diaspora organized projects that are conducted in Belize now? And then that way you build the trust, you build the openness with communities in Belize. And I'm sure, you know, I know Doran, like, we've been interested in that type of work before. Why aren't we doing that?
I think you're right. Policy is not necessary for action. And since independence, we have had a lot of action. The problem with that approach outside of a policy is that it's ad hoc, it's not sustainable, and it comes and it goes with the waves of U.S. immigration policy or Belize, who is in power, and how do you make it more strategic and more consistent is what the hope is that the policy will do. And since I have the mic and talking about data, Dr. Palacio, president of UB, is here, and UB is about to establish a data center in Belize that is going to be holding a lot of data. And that is one consideration to consider. If there's an independent body that has the data and controls it and has the systems, it could be an option. Yeah.
So we're going to wind up this first panel. I think it was a very robust discussion, and I'll give the... Yes, Rishwa.
I'm so sorry. I stepped out and I wanted to hear the end of your what you were saying, but I had to step out. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question because I'm not sure of the verbiage, but just bear with me. So we're looking at policy.
Welcome back. That concludes the panel discussion that we wanted to feature tonight on Naval Stream Connection, sort of rebroadcasting the second annual Belize Diaspora Summit that is being held today, the 10th, tomorrow, the 11th on Friday, and on the 12th and should be concluded on the 12th, a three-day conference, a three-day summit in the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we had just heard about an hour, approximately 56 minutes, of a panel discussion on developing a policy for the Belizean diaspora. Developing a policy, and what we heard today from the panelists is that that policy has to have reciprocity. It has to be reciprocal. It cannot just come from the diaspora itself, but it has to come from the home country Belize itself, government and people. It's a two-way street thing. Any policy that is developed, we have in foreign relations between two countries, between two governments, United States and Belize, there has to be reciprocity for that policy to work. All different kinds of policies between governments. It cannot just be on one side. It has to be on two sides, reciprocal. And I think that is the essence of what we heard that has come out of the first panel discussion that has dealt with developing a policy for the Belizean diaspora to help in the development of Belize. And a policy is very important, but I have to underscore the essence of what came out of that panel today. Excellent discussion by those three gentlemen. Very, very good moderator by the former mayor, Darrell Bradley. Excellent. He's sharp. He understood the points, and he underlined some very, very important things. And I think we should be very proud of ourselves today as a Belizean people, both at home and abroad, and that we are discussing this thing. We are discussing this thing. We are not only having it as a dress rehearsal, some kind of cosmetic change. We are tired of that. We are tired of cosmetic changes where one government comes in, they say something about the Belizean diaspora and for political expediency, and then it just dies out. And as one of the panelists on that policy panel said, it just become up and down like a seesaw. These three astute gentlemen really framed the argument of a policy. I haven't seen anything that was left out. Everything was put on the table. In every policy, there is in every particular country and people, there is it is a history, but that out of that history has to come out a policy to help govern that particular issue and that thing that we are trying to do or trying to achieve for development. And I think I would encourage those of you who may not have seen or have missed tonight's show of Neostream Connection that has rebroadcasted the first day of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. And we were so happy that we was able to have that live broadcast that was done by XTV, and we want to big up our brother Mose Hyde, who is down on the ground in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, bringing that 3-day broadcast back to Belizeans in Belize and across the Belizean diaspora, wherever you are. And again, if you want to hear, if you want to listen to the opening parts of the first day of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0, you can visit the XTV page on Facebook as well as on YouTube and revisit that discussion again. If you want to see that, you want to see more the opening, or see your brother Mose Hyde broadcasting live from Fort Lauderdale, the opening presentations made by the organizers, ARIA LIGHTFOOT, who is the co-host of the show, Neostream Connection. She's one of the organizers with her team, Rishma and Verlene, three excellent dynamic Belizean women who are the movers and shakers on the ground that have made that possible. They did it last year here in Los Angeles, and I myself was one of those panelists. And again, they have made history in making it possible again this year in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And again, I want to say as we wrap up, I am BILAL Morris. This is Naval String Connections. This is an XTV production. Our producer is Nuri Muhammad. And we want to say again, tune in to XTV early tomorrow morning for the second day of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. Again, Belizeans across the Belizean diaspora, tell a friend to visit the XTV Facebook page where they can see live the second day, the 11th, which is Friday, the 11th of July, the second day of the Belize Diaspora Summit. And again, we want to thank you for watching and for joining me in this special broadcast of rebroadcasting the first day of the Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. Belizeans across the Belizean diaspora, again, and Belizeans at home who watches the show religiously in the ground in Belize, across the country of Belize, we want to say to you, thank you for watching.
I am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born it.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them